Everyone, and welcome to the CRCW presentations for our 2020 and 2021 cohorts of winners. I am your Associate Vice Chancellor for Research, Jessie Smith, and I use she, her pronouns. One way that we can empower each other is through knowledge. And today I'm so excited for this knowledge sharing opportunity by showcasing our wonderful UCCS faculty awarded what we call CRCW grants. Started in 2010, the Committee on Research and Creative Work seed grants have been giving faculty on campus the opportunity to further their research and creative goals by helping establish their work, collect initial data to propel their methods, or even launch into new areas of inquiry. Since the start of the program, we've awarded over 150 CRCW proposals to date and have granted nearly $1 million in funding to UCCS researchers. Research is an integral part to our UCCS campus. Our faculty, staff, and students are working diligently to further our knowledge of the world around us and what we know will come about in these presentations to give us a glimpse into that work today. In the face of a global pandemic, we have had to learn to adapt and find new ways to progress, and for many of those in our 2020 and 2021 cohort, the pandemic provided major impacts and challenges to their work, but we are so happy that we're able to be here today in person and to celebrate their work with them. So without further ado, let's get to the presentations and our very first speaker this morning.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to present my research today. So I will talk about the design techniques for performance monitoring counter-based on electrical and computational. So we are living with the malware. So malware is everywhere, and there are many solutions for the malware. So first about the software solution. So software solution is working, but it can be easily compromised because this is software. We need to update every 3 months. Then it will be a burden for most computers, most performance. So there are many other hardware solutions, but they are fixed solutions. It can be a problem. And then also many people trying to use a machine learning concept, but still they have various issues. So in this research, so we proposed the PMC. PMC stands for performance monitoring counters. I will explain next slide. And we are using deep learning, but in deep learning, data quality is very important. So we use the PMC monitoring counter based on profiling data. We also propose detection criteria to detect malware. And also we also discuss about the limitations on PMCs and then some design alternatives with PMCs and acceleration skills. Okay, what is PMC? So PMC performance monitoring counters. These are special registers, which is some component in the computer. So each computer has this PMC already embedded, but the original purpose of this PMC is for measuring the performance. When we use computer, so the performance is measured, and then performance will be tuned automatically. So this is the PMC has that purpose. And then each computer, each CPU has 2 to 6 PMCs in a process. So I want to use this PMC for the malware detection and collect data for malware detection. So we use the 20 benign data. So benign data was collected from the machine, and then we use the 20 the malware data, so it's also known as spyware, adware, so applications. We collect this big profile on this application. So when you profile this data, when you collect this data, one of my students, she forgot to connect the port. So which means we run the malware application on my computer, and then that will go to the world. So I got a warning from my IT. So I got off my internet. I have to reach the more data. And then we use data set standard, and then so we use the cross validation. So with a small number of data, we can use increase the data quality with this. And we use the root worksheet is like the operating system. They provide a port command. So from this port command, we can collect 40 hardware events. So each hardware has an event monitoring system, so we can collect hardware information. Most of them are about the memory or branch predictions, very important CPU activities. So we just collect this data, and then we also use the VCA, which is a machine learning framework. So we compare our result with their result. Okay, this is one example for the PMC activity. So which is from the cache reverse. Cache is one of the memory components in your computers, very important. Then we compare benign and malware. So malware activity is very low. So malware is just like inactive mode, just hibernating, and then it will be active in certain time or certain event. So we use this information. So we use the 40 events, and if you compare the number of events ratio between benign and malware, so malware activity is very low. It's 30 times less than benign applications. So we propose the new criteria, which is called the DOD, degree of distribution. This will show us the sparseness of events. So malware is very sparse and sparse activity. So we use the inactive stuff. So most of the time, so malware is inactive, so it's zero activity. So we just remove that zero activity. So we just collect only active the events. So we use the event sum, and then if you just sum, including zero event, then you can find any sparseness. But if you use effective sum based on the DOD, we can find the 6 events is distinct. So we use these 6 events to categorize the malware applications. So these 6 events will be like cache or branch predictions, some very important CPU activities. And also with this BOD, so we use the 40 PMC events, but we only have a 2 to 6 PMC hardware in the CPU. It's hard to collect 40 PMC events at the same time. Right? With the 40 event, we can clearly cut the benign and the malware. But if we use only 6 PMC from the slide, we use the 6 events, 6 PMC, we have some glitches. So I try to remove this glitch by using deep learning. So this is the overview of the learning framework from the raw data, and use the deep learning concept like CNN. Then we could classify malware detection. So based on the PMC behavior, we just we got the features, and we just tailor the features based on 6 features. And then we also compare the result with the VCA. So this is evaluation results. The first 3 row is from VCA, and second 3 row is from PMC-based detection. So we use 5 performance metrics. So we could remove that glitch with the PMC-based education method. And but the problem is our CPU has only limited number of PMCs. So we just came up with how to increase how to collect more PMC events. Not only 6, we can have 12 or more. Right? So one of the ideas, we can just make a duplicate PMC. So just the same, this is simple design. Existing PMC, we can just duplicate the design from scratch. And then we should have 2 modes. One is a profiling mode, one is just normal mode. So when it is on the performance tuning mode, we can use the existing PMC for the performance tuning, and additional PMC you can use for detection. But normal mode, you can use both PMC hardware for the detection, so we can collect more events. If you compare the area or power, then it will be more area and then even more power because we have more hardwares. Okay, so the other ideas are, so we can just intermediately compile the 6 group and 6 group, but we can use the sampling time shorter. So, but we can have more event. We we can collect more events, which will increase the accuracy. And also, so we processed all the detection already done on CPU, but we can make hardware accelerate. So for just only for pre-processing, we can design dedicated process to detect malware. So we can directly get the malware detection results, or we can just make metadata and CPU will handle the remaining process. So in conclusion, so we proposed the deep learning method with the PMC-based data, and we proposed the detection criteria and discuss the limitations of PMC and design alternatives and examples. So now we are designing the type hardware acceleration model for malware detection. So based on this CRCW support, so we published the 2 papers, and I proposed the one as a proposal. I'm waiting for the result. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Ben Kinsley.
Hello, thank you. So my name is Ben Kinsley. I'm an artist, so this is more artwork that I'm sharing with you that came out of the CRCW grant. I teach in the visual art program, and most of my work is kind of multimedia, sound, video, and I'm also an amateur mycologist. I'm part of the local mycological society here. Boutique Mycological Society, join us. And so my work has been kind of influenced and inspired by the world of mycology and study of mushrooms for several years. This project was titled Tree Tox Populus Tremuloides, and I was focusing on the study of a tree species. I'll talk about it later, but I'm hoping this becomes a series of studies of different trees. But we started, the first one was focused on aspen, Populus tremuloides. And it took place over the course of a year. The CRCW funding allowed me to host 4 events up in Kenosha Pass and in Aspen Grove in Kenosha Pass, 1 per season. We met in the same grove of aspen in the fall, spring, and summer. This is summer, this is fall. We snowshoed in the winter. And in each one of these events, I had a group of speakers who came from different scientific and cultural perspectives to share ideas about the aspen trees. This wasn't directly maybe inspired by a mentor of mine from the world of mycology, Gary Linkoff, who's a famous mycologist. He wrote the Audubon Guide to North American Mushrooms. The Telluride Mushroom Festival in Telluride every year happens in August. He had this beautiful quote on his gravestone that I got a rubbing made of. And he said, "No tree is an individual. All are communities of organisms changing throughout the life and death of a given tree. The tree is a microcosm of all the kingdoms of life. Know a single tree thoroughly, and you know more about life and evolution than any world traveler can ever hope to attain." And I was really thinking about this for a while, and I thought, what would happen if I tried to actually manifest that or really do that? And so what happened over the course of the year is that at each event, we had 3 different speakers from different perspectives, trying to learn about this aspen tree from a variety of perspectives, not just scientific knowledge, but also experiential knowledge and cultural knowledge. And so in fall, we were up there on October 15th. It was actually the coldest of all the events. We had Suzanne Marchetti, who works with the U.S. Forest Service and studies aspens, particularly sudden aspen decline. We had Sarah Bronco, a mycologist who she teaches at CU Denver, and Mary Jane Sullivan, who taught at UCCS in Vapa and was a poet, a filmmaker, and a certified deep listener. So people came up. We had 3 different perspectives talking about the aspen from these 3 different methods. MJ led us on a deep listening walk, which I can talk about a little bit more later. Sarah Bronco passed around mycelium that she dug up and talked about how mushrooms connect with the trees. And Suzanne Marchetti really talked about why aspen are special, this clonal tree species. In the winter, we went back up to the same exact spot, snowshoed in. We had an ornithologist talking about birds and how they use the aspen trees in particular. He studies flammulated owls, which are the smallest tree, the smallest owls, and they nest in the aspen trees. Christine Bierman, who teaches here at UCCS, is the director of the UCCS Tree Ring Lab, talked about dendrochronology and how we actually did a core sample of the tree and looked at that and talked about what can we learn from the core sample, not just annual growth, but also how we can understand what the climate was like years ago based on the annual growth rates of trees and also human interaction in the landscape maybe at that time. And then Marilyn Martirano is an archaeologist talking about human uses of aspen over centuries. In the spring, we had Jamie Kopke, who was a forest therapy guide, a certified forest therapy guide, led us on a forest therapy experience. Walt Courier is a Oglala Lakota artist and designer and activist, talked about kind of native trees in this particular place, like this special connected to kind of the spirit side of things, actually, in a really interesting way. And then Delane Bredvik is an installation artist that has worked with people who study aspen on certain kind of installations, but he talked more about metaphysics and metaphysical ideas. And then we went back in the summer for the final event. We had Ido Aroni from Colorado College. He's a composer and electronic musician, and he actually took live sound samples of the trees, microphones connected to the tree, and then sampled that on his computer and actually performed the sounds of the trees back out to us in this kind of composition. Greg Ragland is an entomologist talking about insect associations with trees, with the aspen. Then Brandon Vogt, who's here in geography, mostly talked about lightning and the elevation and how the weather system is affected and how aspen respond to that. So those were the 4 events. People were invited to come, and be a part of that experience. For me, as an artist, I was using this as a way of, here's some images, looking at mycelium, talking about elk browse on the aspens, core sample of the tree. This was part of the, I think, the forest bathing exercise, deep listening walks, kind of navigating through the forest and listening intently with the sounds of the place. This was Ido, you can see here, doing part of his performance, actually recording and amplifying the sounds of the tree using contact microphones. And then for me, the final piece of that was, after all of that was done, I compiled a lot of audio that I recorded as well. So it's another way of learning. So we're sharing all this information through knowledge sharing. And then I was also thinking about that place and the sounds of that place. So I did a lot of field recordings of audio, and I made a final record soundscape that I have brought one with me if anyone wants to look at the physical object. But we made a limited edition release. So CRCW helped me support all of those events and pay speakers and do all of that. We're in snowshoes for all those people. And kind of get that all together. And then I partnered with an arts organization in Denver called Black Cube Nomadic Art Museum, and they produced the final record part of this, the publication. So it comes with a booklet, which has images and snippets of the conversations, the talks, transcripts, and then a record, an actual vinyl LP that is a soundscape of that place. And it mixes sound, so there's the booklet, and it mixes sound from like each season. So there's seasonal like field recordings from the fall, the winter, the spring, and the summer, so you can actually hear the way that space changes through sound. Winter is almost completely silent. Spring is super, super loud, right, of birds. And then we also I have a mix of audio from all these different microphones, binaural microphones, contact microphones, all these different microphones to record the sounds of this place. And I made a long mix, and included in that mix are actually sounds I got sent to me from a biologist in Utah who actually was the person who his lab proved how sudden aspen decline is happening and why that's happening, which is drought related. He actually got sounds of the cells exploding, cellular embolisms of the aspen tree, sucking moisture out of the ground, and there is no moisture to suck, and the pressure is so great that the cells are exploding. So that's in there too. Sounds like pops and things, but it's really surreal. And then on the other side, I have a deep listening moment of walking, sounds of walking, people walking through the forest with Mary Jane Sullivan's prompts for us how to listen to the space, and then a sample of Ido's performance. So it's a 4-part, 25-minute piece composition, and there's like a 4-minute selection of that. It's very sonic and really interesting audio that Ido produced. I was going to play, so I just released this on March 24th, and at Black Cube we had a listening event. So a lot of people came and listened to the sound in this dark room, this black space. It was kind of great. And then we released the records. I was going to play a snippet, but it's not really working. I think that's okay. You can find the snippets online, and I can put a link. But this was kind of the release of that. And then all the talks, the transcripts of all the talks in full, not the transcripts of the audio, are available online for free. So I wanted to create this like archive of this knowledge sharing, and they're posted on the Black Cube Pneumatic Museum website and related with the event pages of all the events, but also you can go to SoundCloud. That's the link there, and you can listen to all of those if you wanted to. It's like 12 hours of audio. If you're interested in learning more about the project, there's more images and information on my website. And then if you're interested in purchasing, it's pretty expensive. Black Cube has a website of online shop of limited edition artworks, and this is one of the artworks, so they price it more like an artwork than an audio album, but it's available there or through the QR code there. And I will say that this was the beginning for me for this project, and I have an upcoming residency and funding to start the next one in California with a different tree species and hopefully taking a different form. Yet I still want it to be like audio. But yeah, the soundscape is not fully available online, but snippets of that are available to listen to. And then if you're interested in seeing this or learning more, let me know. I can send you links. So thank you.
So much. Man, we'll have you come on up and get ready. Your co-author. Yes, the co-author. She's the star of the show.
All right, so my name is Diane Studi. I'm an associate professor in the College of Education and in the Department of Counseling and Human Services. So I actually changed the title of mine. It was Pet Therapy, Supporting Students with Mental Health and Wellness, but we are on journal article number 3 with Society and Animals, and they actually don't use the term pet. They are called non-human animals. And so we refer to Lizzie here, who's a therapy dog now, as therapy, utilizing a therapy dog versus pet therapy. So something I learned through this process. So what is a therapy dog? Therapy dogs are specially trained dogs. They have to pass a variety of tests depending which organization you are with. We are with the Alliance of Therapy Dogs. So it's the Canine Good Citizen test, and then they have their own tests. They come and observe several times. And they work with a human handler. I happen to be her handler and her owner and the researcher. So I've been multiple roles. And essentially what therapy dogs are allowed to do is to go into nursing homes, hospitals, and schools, and they do visits. Their primary job is to sit and be pet and show love, and that's really about you. There's a video on here that we don't have time to watch, but if you just Google therapy dogs in hospitals, it's a great video showing therapy dogs with kids in hospitals, which is what I hope to do soon. So you've probably seen signs across campus about different dogs. We always want to differentiate when we talk about therapy dogs, that she's not a service dog. She's not trained specifically to work with me in any way. So she doesn't have all of the rights that you would see with a service dog. She's also not an emotional support dog. So that's become a really popular thing. Where emotional support dogs, again, are really specifically trained to give support to one owner, whereas Lizzie or therapy dogs are really trained to help a variety of people. So you can see they need to tolerate a wide variety of experiences, and they also need to be able to provide emotional support and comfort to many people. So that's really what we were doing with our research. So in terms of research at UCCS, the military affiliated graduate student research I was doing was already in process. We started that, we finished before 2020, all of that was in person. So that's the one article that we do have published. That was before the CRCW grant, but sort of what started it. The two that we were able to do due to the funding was working with school counselors in training. This started prior to COVID and went all the way through. So started in person and then we switched to virtual therapy dog visits, which are interesting. We'll talk about that. And then the final study, we have a program here called Campus Connections. It's a youth therapeutic mentoring program. So Lizzie did in person. We were virtual for, I think, a year and a half. And we started our visits back when we were back in person. So the first study I'm not going to go into detail about, but just to give you sort of an idea. So I'm a qualitative research. I love phenomenology. So I do a lot of interviewing, observational data. But what I wanted to show you about this one that we had already completed is you'll notice the emerging themes, that there's a theme across all three studies. So this study was done in our department. We work with AOCs and AMTs from the United States Air Force. And so we teach a lot of classes that are all either officers or enlisted folks in the military. So I was lucky enough to get to teach a class. In those classes, Lizzie comes intermittently. I kind of say she's positive reinforcement. They don't know when she's coming, but they're excited when she's there. I have to get permission from the students that she's able to be there. But over the course of the semester, the students interacted with her probably out of the 15 weeks, 10 to 11 weeks. And these were the themes that came out of those individual and group interviews. They felt connected. They felt not only connected having the dog in class, but also more connected to each other. They sort of had a friendly competition of who got the most time with Lizzie. The emotional and social support, they talked about how difficult their jobs can be, and coming to class was such a new, they take a year off essentially and come to class, that's their job. So having some emotional and social support in coming back to school was helpful. They saw sort of a positive change in climate. So they felt like when they came into the classroom and Lizzie was there, that was really created some positivity. Counseling is not an easy field and there's a lot of pressure and things that come up. And then they talked about basic needs, that an animal sort of loves you unconditionally. And that was something that maybe they didn't always experience in other spaces. And so the reason I bring these up is you'll see, even though the other two studies were with different populations, we started to see some trends. So the first study that I was able to do, or these actually kind of happened simultaneously. So I'm a school counselor. I mostly teach classes in school counseling or review. So again, I was bringing Lizzie into the classroom with permission, intermittently. This one went over the course of basically 3 years. So we started in person with most of the folks, and then we went online. Virtual visits is basically holding your animal up to the screen and they don't understand what you're doing. But it elicits some of the same things you'll see. Just walking over here to do this talk, I had several people stop. They want to interact with Lizzie, they smile. One person said, "Oh, that just made my day." So we get a lot of those reactions, even if they are not physically in the same room, or none of those folks today actually stopped and pet her. So I saw a lot of those same things with virtual visits. So the first theme that emerged in this one was emotional support and safety. So you can imagine these were school counselors who not only did their university shut down, the schools they were working in shut down. So they went from counseling in person to counseling virtually. Many of our students move here. They are living alone. So they were in their homes and they were alone. And they really talked about this idea of emotional support and safety. Connection and belonging. I'll show you a couple of quotes from this study, but they really felt, again, like they connected, that they belonged here, that even if no one else was happy to see them, that they always felt like a therapy dog was. Being present, a lot of the students talked about they would come from internship, maybe they had a really hard day, they were doing threat assessments, and then they had to concentrate on whatever the curriculum was. And so having the dog there helped to sort of ground them and keep them present, and help them sort of take a pause from some of the other things that were happening. And then this was really something I think that was specific to COVID. They talked about this idea, it felt more normal to see Lizzie even in the virtual setting, and it offered some stability that they weren't feeling during COVID-19. So here's just a couple of quotes. I won't read them all to you. But here's an example of someone saying, in the first 5 minutes of interacting with the dog, I felt more relaxed, I was happier. Many of them talked about if they had a presentation to do or things of that nature, having Lizzie to look at felt like a kinder audience, if you will, maybe than their classmates. They felt more connected to the online class. Our program is fully in person. The students did not sign up for an online classroom, and so they were really missing those connections with each other, and somehow, I guess, just looking at Lizzie helped with that. Talked about it's nice having her there to calm me, ground me, bring me back to the present. So not only could they feel more present, but they felt more grounded with that. And then virtually, they talked about helping to normalize the situation. It sort of became a free-for-all where everyone started showing their pets, and you probably experienced that, those of you teaching online. So virtual animal therapy became a big thing to watch cats go by and other things like that. So. And then the third study was with Campus Connections. So our youth are here every Thursday. They're middle school students. And this is actually Lizzie and work, and we have permission to use this. But there were very similar themes. I think the one theme that was unique to youth is this idea of mutual empathy. They were very concerned that Lizzie had certain rules she had to follow in the vest. For example, she can't lick, she can't have treats, things of that nature. So this empathy and vulnerability, they really cared about her. They wanted to know about her outside of the study. And both of those, one is a revise and resubmit with society animals, and one is under review. So again, this idea of calming, emotional regulation, helping them through hard times. They talked about this idea, they started talking more, so they're paired up with a undergrad student who's their mentor, and then we have counselors there to help, but it helped them to start talking to their mentors more by having interactions with Lizzie. And then they really like that she doesn't interrupt and ask questions. If you've ever worked with middle schoolers, they get bombarded and they don't like that. And Lizzie doesn't talk, she just looks at you. So, in terms of implications, just thinking about sort of these novel ways, how can we influence culture? I know it's been really hard coming back in person, and somehow having a therapy dog there seems to help. You know, we have a very emotionally rich academic setting in counseling. It seems to help with that. And then ways to help with regulation and keeping students wanting to come to class, but also being present. I hope for the future, I'm working on a conceptual manuscript right now for school counselors who might want to have their dog trained and bring them to school as a therapy dog. And then I talked about quantitative data. I will have to partner with someone for that. But just going across campus, we have an old card I don't hand out anymore because it says she's 3 and she's 6. But putting a QR code in there and just gathering information from folks across campus. And then we also volunteer at a couple local hospitals. So, okay. No time for questions.
Thank you so much. Next up is Philip Morris.
Right. Okay, thanks, everyone. Take a little different approach. I'll talk about sort of the CRCW grant, sort of like a report, the first few slides, and then I'll get into the research. I just that's sort of my interpretation of today is to kind of give a report out on that grant outcomes and those things. So just speaking broadly, my research is around college access, college wellness, specifically for student veterans. Probably a lot of you know I used to be the director of a veteran center, so very much a population that I'm familiar with. And so what I wanted to do and what I've sort of been able to achieve since the CRCW was to kind of scale out from campus or local level to a more national level with some of the studies on student veteran success and wellness. So that was great. This allowed me to do this. CRCW really allowed me to stand out. I also was able to make a good connection with the National College Health Assessment and the Association for College Health, National Association for College Health. Dr. Mary Hoven is the director of research there. So we've got a really good partnership. She actually just sat on a dissertation of ours for Paige Whitney in our department. So kind of making that connection was really great. And then also the CRCW allowed to get some students involved in traveling to conferences to present the research. So what's important to all of us, guys? Obviously, I'm submitting my tenure packet next year, so this is thinking a lot about CV line. So I apologize for having the slide right up front, but one publication that's come out of this that's really very near to being published was submitted February of 2022. It's still under review, had the second revision, but I feel pretty confident. This will be my third publication with the Journal of American College Health on student veteran wellness. Again, so this is now the national scale. Two presentations, a regional and a national, at the American Education Research Association, and then an award that we received. So budget allocations, the CRCW allowed me to secure the data. There was a fee essentially to get access to the National College Health Assessment data, which is a national health survey for college students. Stata was able to purchase Stata, which is a statistical software program that does a little more advanced work for large data sets, and then travel to those conferences for myself and 3 students, which was great, and then some summer pay to work on this. So here's a picture of us presenting at AERA. Patience Agana here was kind of working on her dissertation proposal now. Kate just finished. She's a rock star. She, I think, maybe worked some with Crest, I think, as a researcher. Dale Wilson is now the director of assessment for the new school in Brooklyn, New York, which is actually a college, not a school. Really interesting arts college. But we all got a chance to go to AERA in San Diego. That was a great trip. We submitted our paper for the adult literacy special interest group, and it won the award. So that was awesome. So we all got these plaques, and students got a $100 check in the mail, which was unexpected, but was really nice. That was great. Some potential grant work coming out of this. The VA has some career development programs that I'm looking at, and Wounded Warrior as well is a big proponent of our servicemen and women and our veterans. I do believe now, obviously, right, we scale up, right? We present, we publish, credibility that really does give us, I think, a chance to submit out for these grants. That's something I'm definitely looking at. The next phase, so the first one was the study that we're publishing is on sleep health and wellness for student veterans. We really got interested in, when we looked at the National College Health Assessment data, some geographic characteristics and some institution level characteristics, and thinking about how do we look at how our students are in wellness across that gradient from small local 2-year schools to the large kind of flagship institutions. So we're sort of posing that question now and looking at some analysis in that regard. Okay, so let's talk about sleep health for student veterans. This was our study. Also have to credit Dr. Kesson Lindsay, who's in Bethel Nursing School as a biostatistician. He kind of helped with some of the analysis and was a great partner as well on the project. Sleep health is a long-standing correlation with academic success for all college students, but there's a lot of literature that shows that. There had been very little done, basically none that we could find that was specific to student veterans and their sleep health. So this was something that we really wanted to look at. It was kind of a gap, and just exploring this a bit more and kind of looking at some of those things. So what does the literature say about sleep for college students? These are sort of the 4, I'd say, big buckets. Just emotional academic stress college stress, right? All students have that. Mental health, SES, and then substance use and abuse are all kind of predictors of sleep. And these are all things as we think about our military members and, exposure to combat, exposure to trauma. These are all things that it could be pretty predictive. And also enlisted servicemen and women really come from low-income backgrounds. As much as high as 60% of student veterans, at least enlisted student veterans, are first-generation college students. So these are all sort of factors that we felt could be predictive. So the National College Health Assessment is a nationwide survey. In the time that they've run it, over 1 million students have taken it. Over 700 college and universities have done this. UCCS does this every, I think, 3 years. I think we actually administer this here as well. So really get good opportunity to look at student veterans at a national scale. There really aren't that many national data sets that really capture that well. So that's kind of something that I've really tried to hone in on in my research. So we wanted to know if there was a difference in sleep patterns for sorry, I didn't define that. Student service members / veterans. This is kind of a clinical term that's being used because as you think about the military population, there's active duty, there's dependents, there are spouses, and veterans. So this is kind of capturing just the veteran, not the National Guard members and that kind of thing. So, the survey asked about hazardous duty. Have you served in hazardous duty? Have you served? So that gave us kind of a cut there to look at those folks that were on hazardous duty and not. We also wanted to look at a peer group of non-veterans. So we did that as well. So here are some of the measures. There were 7 questions on the survey related to sleep health. We looked at all of these because we had in this large data set, there was like 70,000 students, I think, in the data set. We really needed to pull out some similar students. So we did a propensity score matching, which is a procedure that allows you to pull out a control group so you can compare against that sort of treatment group. So that was kind of fun to be able to do that. We ended up with 1,100 hazardous duty student service members or veterans, 1,300 non, and about 1,300 in the match group. We had 2 research questions, and I'm kind of running low on time, so I'm going to jam through this. But it was about the hazardous duty impacts, and then looking at those differences across those 3 groups. We did find significant differences, across this. Generally speaking, the student service members had worse sleep outcomes, pretty much across the board. The effect sizes, the differences were small, though. That was something that we did find when we looked at this. When we looked at, again, a very similar peer match group. So peer match group was about the same age, probably also had children, very similar in all of their characteristics. So here's a quick look at our analyses. We did a multiple analysis of covariance because we had those 3 groups. And these are effect sizes. Again, these are small effects as we look at these differences. If we look at the post-hoc comparisons, there's kind of a lot here. I won't go into all this, but a lot of sort of small differences there that we found. So because I'm out of time, I'm just going to jam through this. But implications, the Veteran Resource Center, any veteran services on campus really should think about wellness. This is outside of VA hospitals, post 9/11 veterans, the highest concentration is on college campuses. So if we think about wellness characteristics and how to support veterans on college campuses is a good way to do that. We also, kind of our recommendations really were around smartphone and other wellness interventions. And that's our study. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, large. Yeah, 3 large books. Large study set was cool. That was good.
All right, thank you, everyone. We have one more left in this session. Yeah, excellent, thank you. I how you do. You're up next.
Hi everyone, it is so accomplishment after failures. All right. So I'm Gilda from Geography, and I have this project with Java in public affairs. She fortunately moved away. So, but anyway, the title of our project is Making Colorado Springs a Safer. And as we move on, we progress, we add in a healthier place to grow both. Okay. So the original objective of our work is to conduct a community-based project that aims to identify the structures, factors that contribute to elder maltreatment risk. So basically, we identify abuse and neglect risk and how that varies across neighborhoods in our city. So we focus mainly on using data clients, basically seniors who assist, who sought assistance from a sympathy organization in town. As we move on, we actually think of, well, there are a lot of direction to develop this project, and now it's more on focusing to provide an information platform that supports senior well-living. And we mainly use modern geographic information system for this task. This is a very robust platform in terms of both the visualization technology as well as analysis power. The beautiful thing about it also, we can develop a web-based platform that actually provide information to the public and aim to support both citizens, user, and as well as the elder service provider. We are thinking about policy makers and standards. So within the second phase of our project here, we use what we call spatial profiles. So spatial profiles are, in a traditional term, you can think of it as elevation profiles. So it's like high and low, certain elevation. But here we are more like using attribute, how characteristics of certain neighborhood actually vary within our study area, within our city here. So we've been using 17 measures, and talk a little bit about that. Socioeconomic, health, isolation, crime, and we use this platform to actually identify and also visualize vulnerable area that we So the product, well, I wish I had that list, but unfortunately I don't, or maybe not yet. After the second years of our project, we successfully developed a web-based report, and I show a little bit of that. And that report was mainly to use as an assistant tool for Silver Key to manage their data as well as to understanding the senior that they are serving. And we are in preparation for our manuscript here, mainly focusing on the second phase of our project, because with client data we have limitation on publication. We cannot really use the client data to publish our paper. So the second paper is more like using that modern JS as a platform to provide a community service information platform. And I've been working with my student as well as a part of that second phase on analyzing accessibility to the facility that provides services to senior. Show a little bit of that. Hopefully I can go really quick here. So the web report, as I already mentioned, is publicly available online and can be used both as the service providers as well as the citizens. So here is a few shortcuts from that web-based platform. We have simple key client and individuals, and then we have all the questions, and the main objective for the first phase was really to identify risk. Is there any risk among these at all? And we use the tool for the interactive dashboard to actually try to understand the profile of our clients. So here is El Paso County's census tract, and we have client aggregated, and we can only present this. And we hopefully we can understand the profile for each of the track. If the simple key data manager would view this, she would be able to interactively click on each of these county and understanding of maybe doing query to know more of the data of all the clients that simple key serves. So here is a little bit in terms of potential elder victimizations. A bit of spatial analysis here. So here are the clients that silver key currently serve in those dots, and then we have a density analysis to really visualize the concentration of these clients. And we basically overlay that same dot, same client's locations on top of a kernel density in terms of elder victimization. So crime against elder. And we do see a significant overlap. If you look alone at here, the points are the ones who are seeking service from silver key on top of the kernel density, high density where crime happened against elders. Also, we use a unsupervised data mining approach. I don't want to go into that, but basically what we did is we have a very large array of client answers aggregated at those tracks, of course, and then we use that algorithm to segregate the track into groups of risk. You can see here the red are the high risk group based on these criteria. And if we kind of like take only a certain domain, and in this case it's financial domain, hopefully to identify financial abuse, senior, so we're talking about average age, average income, client count, and low money for food. So we do be able to identify a group of tracks, for example, green one here, who are younger age, average income is higher than average, but very high, identified as low money for food. So we'll be able to visual the spatial separations in terms of clients. And of course, going into interactive capabilities and that GIS platform for the data manager to really understand the profile of these groups, right? So moving forward, we've been, well, if we cannot focus on the client data alone, how about we talk about all senior in our city? So that is what we call senior spatial profile for our county and identify a suitable neighborhood. So I've been working on collecting all of these data and come out so far 17 different measures. And of course, you can see here, one dimension is the count of our senior, where it is low, medium, height. Similarly, gender identified, living alone, with food stamp, having college degree, so on and so forth, particularly with cognitive difficulties, for example. And this will be increasing. And then we'll be able to use the same approach to see which neighborhood is at high risk. So just present yesterday, I have another student working on this, and his aim is really to identify senior centers located here in our city, those dots, and using a driving road network systems, building underneath with GIS and identify area of low and high access. So you can see here the area of orange here are within 5-minute drive to these centers. With clear color here is 15-minute drive, And the kind of like olive here is like within 30-minute drive. So he did that for driving mode. And then I asked him to move on to, he was complaining about, I only have to wait to use bus and sidewalk. And you can see how that significantly changed. Don't look at the blue, look at the pink to purple. Yellow here is 5 minutes by bus. Up to purple here is 45 minutes by bus. You can see it is significantly reduced. And the purple the blue track here are the track of senior having low number of cars per household. So we'll be able to identify some of the area that need improvement. I guess that's it for me. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. That concludes this part of the session. We're going to take an hour break. We'll be back at 1 o'clock.
All the programs running on your computers in code, and from smaller things like your small coffee maker, you will have some kind of code running on that, and to the bigger things like critical infrastructure and cars. So for this project, what am I focusing on is how do people make mistakes when they write code? And here we're trying to understand the misconception of different developers. So we first give a formal definition of misconception. It is when a person's interpretation of code is different from yours. Some of you might say, I've never written a code in my life. Let me give you a very simple example. I'll explain what's happening here. So here in the middle, we have a simple example. The first line, we're defining a thing. This thing is called m. M's value is 6 minus 1. Very easy. And then the next line of code, I have an integer, int, whose name is v, and v is m multiplied by 2. Then the last line of code is printing the value of v. What do you think the output should be? Should it be 10? Should it be 10 or something else? I see some computer science students here in the audience. Should it be 10 or should it be something else? Yes? It is 10, right? And it's wrong.
Oh,
that is why we're talking about misconception. Your interpretation of code is not the same as a computer. The right answer is 4. Now I'm going to show you why. So let's take a look at this slide. On the left-hand side, we have the original code. So we have m, 6 minus 1. And then the computer is going to understand the code in this way. Let's take a look on the step on the right-hand side. We're just going to do a little replacement of m or m1 and then plug into
Okay, by the way. Now that they are closed, very and what not. Okay, so the key thing is that you have an ambulance. Well, yeah. Well, part of that is as part of the outcome of trend. Idea. And when you find a solution, radio in on something, and that is what we call a bad argument. The bad argument is groups. So we thought, let's use your method. Go house and capture and argument is out. And we Now, the next part is government. That makes that too. So we are wondering. I think how also now. And so we realized we found how we want to find. But we say, you know what? And, you know, cover and finally, and finally, that's just what how we do it. Now we realize all that stuff. You, okay? So we call that accent. Finally, of course, of course, on pre-tenured track. So we
Our next there's a whole table of food out there that
method to give you a background on what's out there. So there are both two flavors. There's supervised, which means that you don't even tell it what your target is going to be. You just hand the data. You're trying to find new dimensions that produce dimensions that would retain most information. And this most common most popular one is called principal component analysis. That's where our method derived from that. And so we have that name in our as well. And then the other flavor is supervised, where you're actually trying to pick dimensions in a way that would retain most information, but retains your target information. So for supervised, there's quite a few of them. So linear analysis, hypothesis squares, bears, anyway, there's just names if you're not in the field. So we threw ours into the mix. We compare ours to unsupervised as well as a few fairly well-known and common supervised method. So I want to give you a little kind of intuition behind our approach. The idea is that Y is your target and X is your input that goes to construct your target. And the intuition that gave rise to this method was that if we want a supervised method, so we ask ourselves, how do I rotate my input in a way that it gives me maximum projection onto the target? And if you just go through the mathematics, you actually cover squares analysis, squares regression, but to do much reduction, we have to actually do this work. We have to apply a kernel to this target to allow us to extract dimensions out of this. And so the interpretation of when you apply a kernel to target is that you're trying to project your input, your x, onto a nonlinear function of your target, which is the y. Okay. I won't down to the math of it, ultimately you end up with an eigenvalue problem. Okay. One major advantage of reducing your data to 2 or 3 is that, again, you're not limited to 2 or 3, you can keep going, but if you can reduce just 2 or 3 and still retain most information you need, you can visualize your data really well compared to being at higher dimensions. And so we applied our method and compared to a few methods on the data set where they have a sona, they bounce off the sona off a rock and a cylinder, metal cylinder, and they're trying to, based on the signals they receive, trying to figure out if I can separate which one's a rock, which one's a cylinder. Okay. And this is known data from the machine learning repository at UCCS, University of California, Irvine. And so up here we can see the heading, but you have principal component analysis, which is a leading unsupervised method, and we have couple of the well-known supervised methods. This is our method right here. And the different color corresponds to the rock and the cylinder. And so you can see that if you just reduce it from, say, 16 features, that's what the raw data would consist, to 2 dimensions, so you can plot it on a plot. And you can see that unsupervised, there's a lot of mixing between the 2 different objects, which makes sense because there's no information about the target. There's no information about which one is the rock, which one's the cylinder. Okay, so that's reasonable, but it retains whatever it thinks is most efficient by reducing from 60 to 2. And then POS and SPCA are 2 existing methods. You can see these are supervised methods, so there is some separation between the blue and the green. Okay. But for us, which surprisingly, I found that when we apply a method to this specific data, we get a lot better separation between the 2 objects compared to some of the. That's one advantage when you reduce your data, is that you can visualize it. The next application we want to look at is how well does it, if you reduce X to few dimensions, how well does it predict Y? Oh, wow. Okay. Thanks. Time flies. All right. And so we applied it to 2 examples. First is the very well-known iris. You have 3 different iris flowers. And you have 4 features. The idea is, can you discern different type of irises based on the features that you use to describe the flowers? And here we have a number of reduction methods. What we want to show is that, again, we're not the best one, but we actually want the best in this data. And so some of the other methods are up here in terms of the error. So on this plot, here is number of dimensions, and here's error. So the lower the error, the better your model is going to be. The next example we looked at is a mice protein expression. Again, these data that come from the UCI, which is a repository, where they have 2 types of mice. One's a normal mice, and one has Down syndrome. And they look at some protein expressions of these 2 types of mice So that end up being 82 features, and you try to predict whether the mice is normal or have Down syndrome. And again, here we applied our method compared to some of the other model methods. So again, this is error versus some conventions. And surprisingly, something about this data that really works well for our approach. The error just this is a log scale. The error somehow just our method is way better compared to the rest of the method. So what is that? This is not trying to oversell our method. We test a number of data sets. Our goal is to say, are there lists out there that our methods works really well? And there are. That's my question that we answer at the end. So we published this work with my student in microlinear algebra applications. Okay. Lastly, I just want to quickly go over our collaboration with SAFA. One of our collaborators in the chemistry department, they look at chemical warfare agent detection. So this is a bio-inspired project where apparently there are butterfly wings where if you put a wing in the presence of these agents, these gases that are chemical warfare simulants, they're not real chemical warfare agents, but they're kind of imitating of them. It changes how visible light interacts with the wing. So they can measure how the spectrum, the reflection of the light before and after you put the wing in the presence of the gas, and you can kind of detect what kind of gas that the wing is in the presence of. And so we applied, of course, the data looks like this. Basically, raw data have kind of before and after have some sort of spectral reflectance. We have wavelengths. So that's what you get as a raw data. The idea is basically these raw data to figure out what kind of gas are present in the wing. So again, we apply our method as well as some of the supervised and unsupervised methods out there. Different colors correspond to the gases here, and there are quite a few gases that were exposed to this wing separately, not at the same time. But what I want to highlight here is that the Christmas colors, so red and green, are the chemical warfare agents. Those ones we detect. And then here are more common household like methane. Things are not deadly. And the main thing I want to point out is that all the methods separate the dangerous gas from the non-dangerous gas. Okay, so the Christmas colors are all separate from the non-Christmas colors. But what we want to highlight is that our method even separate discerns within glass, so within the dangerous gases. The Christmas colors are in the PCA example are kind of mixed together, where even LDA and actually our method too, they are separated. So when you apply supervised emission reduction to the problem, you even discern which type of the dangerous gas it is. So anyway, with that, so outcomes, we published a paper by my undergrad student in 2021, and then for my collaboration with my sound provider, I think I'm out of time, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Okay, next up we have Katie, and I thought you'd come on up. Oh, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kay Yoon. I'm from the Department of Communication. Generally, I study team communication and particularly knowledge sharing in team context in the workplace. I look at how people share knowledge, how they recognize each other's expertise, their now a set of skills and abilities, and how teams as a collective effectively or ineffectively sometimes utilize team members' cognitive resources. So within the large kind of program of research, the CRCW funded project was a part of a larger project where I collaborated with three other co-authors on these pieces, where we examined a particular and very common in the contemporary workplace team environment. So take a look at this example. This is a kind of a snapshot of a public relations and advertising firm in the United States. You would see that there's a marketing team, graphic design team, an account management team, and then there's also a client team as well. To serve a particular group of clients, these different teams need to work together to be able to deliver and accomplish the goals that the client team wants. And as you can see, there's a lot of arrows here that indicates the extent of interactions required to accomplish the goals that they set out to accomplish. So not only the three teams within the firm, they need to interact with each other extensively, but also they need to interact with the client team as well. It's very extensive, and also delivery communication is necessary to be able to identify and deliver the products or services for the client. To make it even more complicated, sometimes they have to put together a task force, bring in individuals from each unit, each team, to respond to a crisis, to come up with a solution in a very fast-paced environment. In addition to the day-to-day routine activities or tasks they need to perform to serve the clients. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that are going on. We never are part of just one team. Probably you can attest to this as well in your work. You're part of your department, you're part of multiple committees, and you're part of your own professional organizations outside the university, other research teams intersecting multiple disciplines. So this kind of represents a very complex multi-team environment where we typically work in these days, in a contemporary workplace. And we wanted to look at how teams process knowledge and share information in teams in the context of this networked, multifaceted team environment. The previous research on team knowledge sharing, typically they have looked at extensively how team internal variables and factors influence team knowledge sharing processes within the team boundary. However, we wanted to kind of go beyond that and explore how the factors external to the team, such as multi-team environment, the interactions with people outside their team, how those things actually affect internal knowledge sharing in the team environment. So we paid particular attention to team members' boundary work, which refers to the extent to which team members manage their boundaries in the context of managing their own team, their primary focal team, and at the same time, managing the members of the teams outside their focal team. So the arrows that indicate how those things actually affect and the ways in which they manage those relationships and team boundaries affect the internal knowledge sharing processes within their primary and focal team. So here's our research model. As I was saying earlier, we wanted to look at how boundary work affects team knowledge sharing processes. When we conceptualize and also operationalize the boundary work, we looked at two types of boundary work. One was boundary spanning, the other was boundary reinforcement. Boundary spanning activities refer to going outside the team. So as we looked at the earlier example in the advertising firm, you need to go outside your team, talk to people as a member of the account management team, you need to talk to people in the design team so that the vision of the ad should be accurately reflected in the design of the advertising. So you need to go out there and then also share your knowledge with the design team and also learn about the knowledge of the design team members. So there's a lot of knowledge sharing happening through boundary spanning activities. On the other hand, knowledge reinforcement activities actually mark the team boundary. So we need to protect our team. We need to protect our team members and their time. We need to reinforce our team identity and stability and coordination. So these two types of boundary work are kind of opposing forces. And we wanted to take a look at how those types of boundary work affect knowledge sharing processes in teams. To operationalize and conceptualize also the team knowledge sharing processes, we adopted the theoretical perspective called transactive memory systems theory. Essentially, transactive memory systems theory argues that team knowledge sharing effectiveness can be measured by three mechanisms. One is specialization, how team members are able to differentiate each member's knowledge and skills and abilities, and how well they are able to recognize and utilize the specialized areas of expertise. And then credibility is about the extent to which team members are able to trust and rely on each other's expertise. And then coordination is the level of orchestration among the members about how they actually retrieve knowledge and encode knowledge that other members have in their team. So mainly, we wanted to see how the two types of boundary work affect the three components of transactive memory system in teams, so knowledge sharing effectiveness. And then we also wanted to throw in another variable, which is the use of technologies. Teamwork, I mean, if you can think about your work, we can't really get anything done without communication technologies. And the pandemic actually pushed that even further into that direction. So the visibility affordance refers to the idea that, the extent to which people perceive particular technological platform or devices or tools are able to make our work visible to others. So what kinds of messages or content or communication content do we make available to others to see? And sometimes we can make the networks of people that we have and relational ties visible to others too. So we wanted to take a look at the impact of the visibility affordance of technologies that people use and how that has direct effect on transactive memory system, and then also its moderating effect for the relationship between boundary work and transactive memory. So we conducted an online survey with paid participants from Paul Tripp's panel, and then there's some information about the participants here, and the average number of teams that they worked in simultaneously was 3.36 teams. So there's a definitely multi-team environment they were in, and we used 3 different measures to measure the key variables that I just explained to you. So here's the results. Some of the hypotheses were supported, but also there were some surprises. So as you can see, the highlighted ones were the statistically significant impact. Boundary spanning positively affected specialization and credibility, but negatively affected the coordination. So external activities actually hurt the coordination of team knowledge sharing, and then reinforcement positively affected the credibility, but and also positively affected the coordination. And visibility affordance had a positive impact on all 3 dimensions of transactive memory system theory, which we expected. The interaction effect between the boundary work and visibility affordance was something that we didn't expect. There was no effect for the interaction of boundary spanning and visibility, but negative interaction effect for reinforcement and visibility. And as you can see here, the positive effect of reinforcement on specialization had an effect only when visibility was low. So when we use technologies that are high on visibility, it's quite powerful that it kind of nullifies and eliminates the effect of the reinforcement. The boundary work effect actually goes away. And that was the case of the exact same pattern for credibility and also coordination. So what did we learn? Team knowledge, internal knowledge sharing is affected by the external environment. And we need to pay attention to the ways in which we manage team boundaries in the multi-team environment. And the spanning helps with specialization, but it doesn't help the coordination. And it kind of flips a little bit when it comes to the reinforcement. It helps coordination, but not others. And then the effect of technology visibility affordance was quite powerful. So we might want to think about what kinds of technologies we want to adopt to maximize the visibility. And we have a lot of options these days. So I think that's probably one of the key takeaways from the study that we conducted here. And we want to move on to the next project where we can address some of the limitations. And we want to collect the field data where we can measure and examine the team level phenomenon as opposed to individuals, which we did in this also we want to look at a more diverse population in our survey study and the field study in the future. And then we want to kind of go deeper into the conceptualization and measurement of visibility to see that out into two different types of visibility in the future. I'm happy to report that this is the manuscript or the top paper award in the Group Communication Division National Communication Association Convention last year, and then it's currently under review in the Management Communication Quarterly. We just went through the first round of revision. We're hoping we'll get the good news in a few weeks. And then parts of the data was used in preliminary data for NSF grant under Science of Organization program, and we're still waiting to hear from that. So thanks for listening.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, next up, we switch to psychology. Rachel, there, you're up next.
Yes, so as a research neuropsychologist, I am interested in studying healthy cognitive aging and examining factors that can contribute to symptoms leading to neurodegenerative diseases like dementia processes. And one of those factors can be substance use, so alcohol use as well as cannabis use. And this CRCW focused on measuring cannabis use among older adults. So in the United States, we have a variety of laws regulating cannabis use. Most recently, 20 states have legalized for recreational as well as medical cannabis use, while 18 have legalized cannabis just for medical purposes. Cannabis use remains illegal in 12 states. And so this can then lead to different patterns of access and use across the country, but also creates some very interesting limitations for research given the differences with federal regulations as well. So why are older adults important to study in this context? Older adults are actually one of the fastest growing groups among cannabis users. A lot of folks think about adolescents first, but especially for medical purposes, there's a lot of interest among older adults for replacing some of their medications with cannabis. And currently, about 5% of the US population over the age of 65 uses cannabis, although that number is expected to grow quite a bit as cannabis is legalized across more states. And this is important because older adults, as they age, can have stronger impacts from any psychotropic drug or medication and be more vulnerable to risks. So for older adults, that looks like risk of falling, for example, differences in balance and coordination, acute cognitive effects. But in some ways, different cannabinoids or the individual chemicals within the cannabis plant may actually be neuroprotective, as in particularly have anti-inflammatory benefits. And so in particular, for health researchers, cannabis represents potential for new treatments. And one of the other challenges about studying cannabis among older adults is that most researchers who study younger populations ask about long-term use. So how many years have you been using cannabis, for example? But for older adults, this can look quite a bit different. They may have used continuously their whole lives. They might start and use as an adolescent or young adult and then pick up use again as an older adult after not using through midlife. Or they may be initiating use particularly late in life for more context. And in terms of public health interests, one of the challenges, like I've already mentioned, is that older adults can be vulnerable to medication interactions. And in particular, there's evidence that older adults who are already prescribed medications are more likely to use cannabis. But it's difficult for them to get information about how cannabis might impact their health. or their existing medications. And in particular, family and friends are the folks most often giving advice to older adults about cannabis. And those family and friends are highly likely to be younger adults. So this represents a challenge for older adults who are interested in getting more information. And when it comes to research, it can be difficult to navigate different regulations when on a federal level, and in particular in terms of federal funding, cannabis is still classified as a Schedule I substance. So there are a lot of very creative researchers out there navigating this problem. But for the interest of this project, I was really seeking to guide basic measurement issues. What aspects of cannabis use among older adults are most relevant for describing their cognitive function or perhaps cognitive complaints? Because many different researchers have used many different methods. Visual guides like this are quite common among younger adults, pardon me. But older adults are more likely perhaps to vape or use edibles, or again, not even track perhaps what the content of their product is. And that opens them up to even more variety in products they might be using. So the CRCW project recruited 51 participants who were older adults who had used cannabis within the last year. This project was particularly impacted by COVID and having to navigate what would otherwise be face-to-face interactions with older adults online. So this initial sample was complete survey data on was about half women, highly educated and with limited diversity. And most of these folks have been long-term users. So they did show the pattern of having initiated use early in life. About a third of the sample had started use midlife, which is important because by then most of their brain development would have already been and a small number of participants, only about 8%, endorsed starting use later in life. On average, these folks were using most days of the month, a little bit more than half, and about 70% of the sample had been using cannabis regularly for more than 20 years. So our initial findings among this sample in terms of what measure was most relevant for cognitive function was their endorsement of cannabis use disorder symptoms. So this means problematic use, things like developing tolerance, craving cannabis when they're not using it, spending a lot of time using it, and other symptoms of that nature. So those symptoms were most associated with self-reported cognitive complaints, so noticing that there had been a change, perhaps having been slowed down or having less confidence in cognitive abilities. And those symptoms were also associated with mental health in important ways. So comorbid or co-occurring with anxiety and depression symptoms. And this was all while controlling for alcohol consumption, which is also particularly to impact cognition in older adults. And interestingly, measures that were most relevant were reported for younger adult research were not associated with any of our measures in our older adult sample. So the total years of use was not at all associated, and neither was days of use in the past month. A smaller subset of these folks completed virtual neuropsych testing. So this is when folks would complete measures of executive functioning, processing speed, but all in telehealth. So this subset had quite similar demographics but had been using cannabis longer term. And importantly, they did agree to not use any product right before their testing session. So no acute effects, but again, we couldn't control for that in a virtual session. And interestingly, verbal learning and memory is one area that can be particularly impacted by cannabis use among younger adults. And in this case, it was greater frequency of use, or again, how often are these folks using cannabis through the last month And that was specifically associated with a lower learning slope, which means that despite repeated opportunities to learn information, these folks were not encoding and able to learn as many words as learning tasks. And this was particularly true for our participants who identified as men compared to women. So overall, what have we learned from the CRCW? In particular for clinicians, they would be interested to know that use disorder symptoms would be most associated with cognitive complaints. We are observing gender effects similar to younger adults. And importantly, for older adults, cannabis use may be impacting a learning process more so than outright learning. So these findings have supported one grant that is currently under review by the Institute for Cannabis Research. 3 graduate student poster presentations have already been completed from these data, so graduate students have been highly involved. And in particular, next steps will be to examine other cognitive process scores.
All right, we have one more in our morning session. Last but certainly not least, Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Deanna Shalmutzy. I'm an assistant professor in the psychology department, and my research really focuses on cognitive development. And so today I'm going to be talking about one of the projects supported by CRCW. So the funding has supported multiple different projects, a few different grant submissions, and lots of presentations. So it was very fruitful overall. So I'm going to be telling you about the development of adaptive help seeking in children. Okay, so I want to sort of start out with an example that highlights the relevance of help seeking. So imagine you're a student and you're reviewing some kind of biology notes, and you come across a question that you don't really know the answer to. So this kind of feeling of uncertainty may lead you to decide to raise your hand and ask for some help, right? And so the teacher might come over and give you a little hint to help you kind of answer that question. Or perhaps in another scenario, maybe there's a student that reaches out to a peer, right? And then the peer will point out where the correct answer is in the textbook, okay? And so as sort of partially highlighted by this example, there's lots of different processes that go into help seeking. So one is identifying whether there's a problem. Is help wanted or needed? Are you in a context where it's appropriate to seek help? What type of help should you seek? What level of support? Who you should seek help from, right? Then you actually have to solicit that help, and then you have to kind of integrate that help into your learning and decision process. And so in my research in particular, I'm interested in understanding the role of metacognition in help seeking. So metacognition is our ability to self-reflect about our own cognitive processes, right? And so when that child self-reflected about her knowledge that she feels uncertain, right, that is a manifestation of metacognition. And so metacognition may play a role in multiple different aspects of help seeking. For example, identifying whether there's a problem, what level of support you should seek, how to integrate that help, and so forth. And so adaptively seeking help, or seeking help in a way that can kind of maximize your learning or performance, is a really important self-regulation skill that children must learn to master. And adaptive help seeking has been linked to broader academic and learning outcomes as well. So for this line of research, I had a few different questions that I wanted to answer. So one was, how is the ability to actively seek help compared to other strategies in benefiting memory retention? So as educators, we hopefully all know the benefits of active learning, right? Having engagement, volitional control over your learning can be beneficial to decision making. It can lead to higher memory performance, can improve metacognition, and this is especially true in adults and older children. And help seeking is a form of active learning because typically individuals can volitionally decide when they would like to seek help or what type of help to seek. Additionally, there's a lot of previous research that shows that engaging in what's called retrieval enhanced learning leads to better retention than restudy strategies. So for those of you who don't know, this is also known as the testing effect. And so engaging in that difficult process of retrieving information on your own leads to better learning than simply restudying your notes, right? So this is why in all our classes, we have lots of tests and quizzes and things like that. And that's just not helpful as an assessment. It actually benefits students' learning. And so what we wanted to see is how the option of actively seeking help might compare to these other types of learning strategies. And of course, we wanted to know how metacognition might play a role in all of this. So there's previous research that shows metacognition is helpful for other types of adaptive decisions, such as deciding how long students might learn information or study information, what information they might decide to volunteer, and so forth. And so here we're exploring its role in help seeking in particular. Okay, so for this particular study, we had children ages of 8 to 13, since we know about these metacognitive improvements during this period of childhood. We had about 70 children. Their average age is about 10. For the results I'm going to be showing you, I'm median splitting them. So like 8 to 10 and a half, 10 and a half to 13 are going to be the two age groups. And so this research was conducted using remote methods via Zoom. So children would complete 2 sessions about 24 hours apart. And they would be monitored by a research assistant who would help kind of answer questions, explain instructions, and then children would complete the task on their own computer, but screen share so we can make sure that they're staying on task and so forth. This research and our predictions were pre-registered in open science framework. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, it's pretty common. Well, it should be, I guess, more common. But in behavioral sciences, it's one way for you to kind of tell the world, like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I predict is going to happen to sort of keep you honest, right? And the majority of work was spearheaded by my former graduate student, Michelle Shields. And so what would happen is children would start with an encoding phase where we presented them with a series of facts about animals. And these facts fell across 3 different categories. So something about how an animal moves, what an animal eats, and about an animal's eyes. And so they would study these facts. And then afterwards, they were given a practice test. We told them, hey, this is a practice test to help with your learning for a final test that you're going to be taking tomorrow. And then during this practice test, they actually had different types of trials or conditions. And so in the help available condition, what would happen is they would first start, they would see a picture of an animal and they would indicate how confident are they that they're going to recall the fact associated with this animal they just learned, not so sure, kind of sure, or really sure. And this here is our measure of metacognition. And then they had the option to seek some help. And so they could seek help in the form of a hint, where we told them sort of the category of the fact, or they can seek the entire answer, or they can elect not to seek help at all and just answer on their own. Then we have these other types of conditions, the no help condition, where after providing a confidence reading, they simply have to answer on their own. And then we also have this restudy condition, where after their confidence reading, they simply restudied the entire fact. And to control for this re-exposure here, in all of the conditions after they provided a response, we did give them that whole animal fact again. And then 24 hours later, they came back and they took a final memory test where they'd give a confidence rating and then answer the question in the absence of any help available. All right, turning to our results. First, we wanted to just verify our children actually seeking help in our task, right? So when help was available, what I'm plotting here is the proportion of time that help was sought as a function of age, younger in blue, older in green. And what we see is on average, they did seek help about 35% of the time. Younger children tended to seek help more, and this is partially because they had lower performance, so they needed more help. And while I don't have time to show it today, we also see other developmental differences, such that older children proportionately sought more hints relative to answers. But they are electing to seek help, so let's see how selective they are in that help seeking. And specifically, how does metacognition support this ability to seek help? And so what I'm plotting for you here is confidence on the y-axis as a function of that help-seeking decision. So sought help versus did not seek help. Younger children, again, in green, older children in blue. And you can see both our age groups are being selective. So when they elect to seek help, they tend to be less confident on average in their answer relative to when they actually don't seek help. And we also see an interaction here with age such that older children tend to be more efficient at this process. And so this difference here is bigger, mainly driven by how older children are even more confident when they elect not to seek help. So then how does active help seeking compare to the other strategies in benefiting memory retention? So here I'm plotting final test accuracy on that test that second day as a function of practice condition, help available, no help available, or restudying. And so you also see a clear age group effect, right? Older children remembered more information than younger children. And we also see a main effect of condition here, such that when help was available and when no help was available, children do better relative to restudy. So here we're replicating that testing effect. But we're not seeing what we were hoping for, which is that children overall would do better when they have the ability to actively seek help. But we thought, well, maybe metacognition is important to see these benefits from active help seeking, right? And so what I showed you here are these average differences between these two conditions, but there's actually a lot of individual variability. So if you look at individuals here, you can see that those plotted in a purple line are the ones who are benefiting from having help available, whereas those in the gray line are not. And so we wanted to see, can we capture any of this variability? And we were interested in metacognition. So what we did is we looked at that difference as a function of their metacognitive performance, which we operationalized here as the difference in confidence for when they elected to seek help versus not seek help. So I'm plotting that for you here. So retention benefit from that available help as correlated with metacognition during help seeking. And here are our results. So in younger children, there's no relation, but in older children, there is, such that those children who are more efficient at using metacognition to seek help when they presumably really need it are the ones who are benefiting from it the most. So to conclude then, we see that the ability to kind of use confidence to guide help-seeking decisions improves throughout early and middle childhood. And metacognition does contribute to children's ability to benefit from active help-seeking, such that older children, right, who are better at metacognitively guided help-seeking were the most likely to benefit from that available help. And lastly here, we do see that engaging in that retrieval and enhanced learning process of retrieving that information leads to better memory than simply studying information, even in relatively young children. So thank you all for your time. Sources of funding here, fingers crossed for grant applications. Thank you all.
All right, thank you everybody. That concludes our first session of CRCW presentations. Lindsay, go ahead and pause the recording for me. Thank you. As we transition to the next and welcome to the CRCW presentations of our 2020 and 2021 cohort of winners. I am your Associate Vice Chancellor for Research, Jessie Smith, and I use she, her pronouns. One way that we can empower each other is through knowledge. And today I'm so excited for this knowledge sharing experience by showcasing our wonderful UCCS faculty awarded what we call the CRCW grants. Started in 2010, the Committee on Research and Creative Work grants have been giving faculty on campus the opportunity to further their research and creative goals and help establish their work, collect initial data to propel their methods, or even launch into new areas. Since the start of the program, we have funded over 150 CRCW proposals and granted nearly $1 million in funding to our UCCS researchers. Research is an integral part of UCCS. Our faculty, staff, and students are working very diligently to further our knowledge of the world around us, and we know that these presentations will give just a glimpse of that work that our faculty are working on. In the face of a global pandemic, we have had to learn to adapt and find new ways to progress. For many of our 2020 and 2021 cohort, the pandemic provided some major obstacles and challenges to this work, so we are extra happy that we can be here in person today to celebrate their work with them. So without further ado, welcome to the last afternoon session of the day, and let's start the presentations with Daniels.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. And I wanted to start off by thanking everybody who reviews the CRCW applications. So that's a lot of work. And for the university, to thank the university as well for providing this funding mechanism, which is really vital for us to be able to carry out our preliminary research efforts in pursuit of bigger pots of money out there in the world. So I actually wanted to talk a little bit about not just my project, but kind of stepping back a little bit. So during COVID, this project shifted, as many projects did at that time. And I was considering integrating my original plans for this with some other existing work that I had going. And it wound up being sort of a merge. So my research is primarily looking at adolescent girls' development, and body image and media use are key aspects of that. And so in this project and in some of my larger work, those are key components of what I study. So body image and media use. So generally speaking in our field, unfortunately, a lot of the research has focused primarily on European American youth, specifically around body image concerns. And so this is a big problem for many reasons, of course. We have underrepresentation related to race and ethnicity and other social identities. Also, when you consider the role of media, youth of color in the United States actually use media at higher rates than their European American peers. So it's particularly problematic that they were really kind of left out of this research. So with that as sort of a backdrop, I guess I'll add another piece. In the field of research on media effects, in terms of social media, we've really come a long way in how we've measured this methodologically. So when we started doing this kind of work, we were just asking really broad kind of global questions like, how much time are you spending on social media? So that was useful kind of back in the early 2000s or 2010s, but it's really not useful today. So we know, for instance, that what youth are doing on social media matters tremendously. So if they are following beauty influencers, you would expect a bigger impact on body image concerns versus following cooking shows or something else. So as a field, we've really kind of tried to advance how we measure these things, but we haven't made a ton of progress. So in this particular study, I did try to capitalize on some very new measures that have been introduced into the literature to get a better sense for what's happening in terms of these connections between social media use and any body image outcomes. I also wanted to kind of explain why body image is a core focus area for me, but I want to, again, sort of pull the lens back and talk about how we consider body image in our culture. And often it's really individualized, right? So individuals are told, well, you need to feel better about your body, right? We do this with adolescent girls. We put it on individuals to kind of fix what I consider to be more of a systemic problem in our culture that's often connected to our media environment. And we also often sort of discount psychological distress that individuals are feeling as maybe not that important to us as a society. And I would argue that that's highly problematic. And psychological distress has very important downstream consequences. So in some of my other research, I found that adolescent girls, middle school age girls, right? So we're talking about fairly young girls who are highly engaged in appearance-focused social media behaviors. So like I mentioned, following beauty influencers, that kind of thing. Those girls tend to feel that more poorly about their bodies. And then when we look at their attitudes towards engagement in academic areas, and I've studied this within STEM in particular, they perceive higher costs and lower sort of benefits to being involved in STEM. So this distress that they're feeling actually has downstream consequences that affect us as a society when we especially think about it in the context of lower rates of engagement by women in STEM fields. And again, if we think about this from a systems perspective, we can identify things like media as problematic and really target that as an area for intervention in school settings, youth group settings, ideally educating media producers and the like. So that's a little bit of a big picture about the work that I do and why I do it. In this particular study, I, with some collaborators, collected data, and again, this is sort of COVID related, but it happened during the pandemic, so it needed to be online. And so because we had some funding through my CRCW and some other funding my collaborators had, we were able to kind of cobble together the ability to hire a third party to recruit our sample. And this is especially important for me because in Colorado Springs, accessing youth of color is challenging. So we were able to use this third party, Qualtrics actually, in case anybody else does human subjects research. Qualtrics does recruit. It is more expensive and more time consuming, but minors, adolescents through their Qualtrics panel service. So we used that to collect a sample of 800 adolescent girls from 4 different ethnic backgrounds. So Black or African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, white, European American, and this is the danger of not bringing your notes with you. I'm forgetting the last category. No, we didn't actually get Latina. That's a whole other. So we gathered that sample in the US, but we were also able to get a similar sample in England. And so these countries, this was part of this larger research team, these countries were selected because they are multicultural. Individuals who live there are multicultural, right? So from many different ethnic and racial backgrounds. So we thought that it would be valuable to be looking at girls from diverse backgrounds in these 2 different national contexts. So we were able to collect all of our data. We are definitely in progress at the moment. But one piece of this project that we have already kind of moved forward with is looking at how Black girls who consume a lot of media that focuses on what we call Eurocentric beauty ideals. And by that, I mean this sort of overvaluation of lighter skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and a thin body shape. So Black girls who are exposed to more of that through their media consumption, we see a relationship with poor body image. So that's been informative to think about, again, that system perspective of how this media might be an intervention point. So for instance, media literacy efforts and so forth could be beneficial targeting media consumption. We're also interested in whether greater identification with your ethnic heritage might be protective against exposure to Eurocentric beauty ideals through media. So that's kind of on our list. And we have a number of papers that we're working on in terms of getting out our findings based on this CRCW grant. So that's a little snapshot of my work and how this project fits into it. The title of this talk included the word sexualization, so I'll kind of spend another minute talking about that. Body image pressures on girls today include this Eurocentric overvaluation of particular characteristics, but sexiness is a component of that as well. So we tend to see girls who are in a normative developmental stage in which sexuality becomes more prominent, really trying to wrangle with the culture's press for sexiness. So that is another piece of what we have included in our survey, and we are going to be looking at that. So that's sort of to be determined, but it's an element of this project. So I think that's all that I wanted to talk about. So thanks for your time and attention.
All right, thank you so much. Next up, we have Melissa. How do we advance? Right. Okay, so much. I took, where is it, are your directions very much are in a concrete fashion, and pretty much this is focused on the outcomes. I've not a lot of background. We did receive a grant for a study, or I received a grant for a study of the relationship between metabolism, body composition, sleep, and quality of life in women. Let me just move a little bit forward. We have a timeline I couldn't resist. We received our grant funding, and thank you very much for that, in April of 2020. We collected data on 2 participants, and then mask mandates came in and we had to stop. We collect physiologic measurements, so the participants cannot wear masks, and we are far too close in touching people to social distance. So we stopped recruitment until 8/21, about 14 months, 15 months later, when the mask mandates were stopped. We radically collected on 1 more participant, and the mask mandate came back. So then, in April of 2022, thank you, Governor Polis, the mask mandates went away completely, and we collected data on 117 women between April and November of last fall, when we finally closed the study. So we have data on 120 women. See if I can use my cheat sheet here and not go backwards. Okay, our purpose was to evaluate the direct and indirect relationships between resting metabolic rate, which is the rate of calories you burn at rest, and oxygen consumption, body composition, which is basically fat and lean mass, sleep quality, and then quality of life. We have both quality of life related to health, related quality of life, and we also have a couple of measures that we consider quality of life, one having to do with physical activity, quality of life, and the other one having really just to do with stress. We collect data on women only because women are at greater risk throughout the lifespan. Our secondary purpose was to collect pilot data for an NIH grant application to meet the requirements of an incentive grant that we've been, Andrea Hutchins and I had been awarded from the Dry Bean Health Research Program. And then our third purpose, if you will, was to increase or establish a stronger record of scholarly publication between the 2 of us to strengthen our future grant applications. Andrea and I think we've submitted 8 NIH grant publications over the last 10 years. And we score okay, but we think it would be stronger if we had a stronger joint publication record. So our outcome, we recruited and tested 120 women between the ages of 25 and 89. Their average age was 60, so it's skewed somewhat up in older women as opposed to truly younger. So far, in terms of data entry, we have entered all of the data for demographics, metabolism, body composition, and strength.
but our quality of life and sleep data are only about half entered. So we've had 66 participants with full data at this point. We hope to finish all of our data entry by June and then start writing. We did submit our NIH grant application in June of 20. We did not have our pilot data, so although we planned a resubmission, we didn't go ahead and do that. We scored, our overall score was 45, which puts us in the might be funded category. But we think that without the additional pilot data and a stronger record of publication, it's better just to hold back. I think anyone who's done this for any hybrid grant application, it's a lot of work. And to do it knowing that you're not going to get what you want, it's like, wait, there's other stuff we can be doing. My dean is here, I'm sure. Let me see, and then we did receive our incentive grant of $20,000 from the North Harvest Bean Growers Association. Thank you very much to them, and we really will, we hope, follow through on a stronger grant application in their favor. And then, I got this, our results. Said you wanted outcomes, and this is the best we can do. Right now, looking at the resting metabolic rate data, we have both RMR, resting calories, and VO2, oxygen consumption. We found that we used a very novel device. It's a portable handheld metabolic device that women just, you put a mouthpiece on that's similar to a metabolic cart, only you just hold it in your hand, you rest quietly and with nose clips, and you breathe. It's really low burden, low cost, very easy. It's been validated against the larger metabolic carts. And so from that point of view, it's valid. But there hasn't been a lot of evidence out there. And so we believe we can get a paper strictly on construct validity, looking at convergent and structural validity in relation to known correlates of metabolic rates such as age, body weight, waist circumference, BMI, the lean mass index, fat mass, lean mass, and weight strength. There are, I put into SPSS because I'm compulsive, but you can see the relationships going across with RMR and VO2. So we have strong relationships, and we believe that a clinical journal would be very interested in this data. Let me see, we also found, as we hope to find, a relationship between metabolism and health-related quality of life. There have been, at least at the point where we submitted our grant application to CRCW, there were no papers, no evidence, nobody had really looked at this relationship. We know there is a strong relationship between body composition and metabolism. And there is a relationship between body composition and health-related quality of life, but nobody has looked at metabolism and quality of life. So we believe our preliminary data will be of interest for publication. We are about halfway in terms of uploading our data, but we can see a strong and significant relationship with emotional health, energy, fatigue, well-being, and social function as domains of quality, health-related quality of life. We also looked at metabolism and sleep. We did not find a relationship, but we will, of course, wait and enter our data. We found a strong relationship between sleep, health-related quality of life, and a measure that that's a surrogate for physical activity quality of life. So we believe there is another paper in that. I will not put data because they're hard to read. There we go. Okay. We also found a relationship between stress and sleep. This was unanticipated, but we had a measure of stress as we'll say, surrogate for quality of life. And we have 2 measures of sleep, looking at both sleep last night, sleep last week, and sleep last month, that can be analyzed against separate questions or separate domains of our other tools. But we just, for purposes of this presentation, I ran a quick analysis. And indeed, there is a strong relationship between our stress measure and sleep last night, last weekend, last month. I think I got them all. Are there any questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Next up is Bryn Adamson. Come on up, please.
Great, thank you. Okay, start my timer. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you everyone on Zoom land. Thank you to the CRCW and the Office for Sponsored Research for the CRCW grant. This was awarded in 2021, like 4 months after I started my job here, and I still lived in Illinois, and it worked out great. So the title of my project, or the title of my presentation really is evaluating the functional benefits of the Pilates +4 MS program. I want to start with thanks to my team. One of my graduate students, who is presenting her capstone findings on Friday, was a huge part of this program. She was able to present some of these findings on my research day, so big thanks to Layla Al-Masri. My partners, Megan Copel-Duffy and Stacey Kirkpatrick, who were our instructors for this intervention. And then my colleague, Manuel Hernandez, who is a biomechanics expert, and Keston Lindsay, statistics expert. This was something I could not do without my team. So our overview for today, I'm going to tell you about MS. I'm going to tell you about Pilates. I'm going to tell you about our program design for the P+4 MS program. If you had noticed, I made it like my favorite part, maybe not my favorite, but was making the logo. So, anyway, cool logo, slick logo. We'll tell you about our research methods, and then the results, next steps, and future directions. So, an introduction to multiple sclerosis, or MS. This is a neurological condition, one of the most prevalent, that affects primarily women at a ratio of about 3 to 1. The prevalence in the United States is about 1 million people and 2.3 million worldwide. So we have a higher prevalence in the United States, and there are lots of reasons for that, none of which we know for certain. Our symptoms and impairments vary quite widely. And so as you can see here, maybe not so well, walking difficulty affects almost 50% of people with MS, impacting walking, but also functional movements, which may also impact activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living. Fatigue is one of the biggest and has the biggest effect over the course of a person's time with multiple sclerosis. But then we also have sensory impairments, mood impairments, cognitive dysfunction, a wide range of symptoms. And the most prevalent form of MS is relapsing remitting MS, and these symptoms often come and go. Or you might have a relapse, get new symptomology, new lesions in the brain or in the spinal cord, and then you have a new impairment. Some of these symptoms are very, very visible, and some are very invisible. Common treatments are pharmaceutical in nature. There are some that are symptom targeted and some that are disease modifying, meaning on a neurological level, and they're working to impact the immune mediation of the disease and trying to slow the creation of new lesions. However, rehabilitation like occupational therapy and physical therapy are very common. And then complementary therapies like exercise and nutrition are gaining traction. Exercise is where I'm going to focus on. Exercise is a very important complementary therapy. I don't like the word therapy, but a very complementary therapy for multiple sclerosis. It has benefits on almost every single symptom of MS, even with some emerging evidence that it can impact cognitive impairment. And we see some data that it's actually acting like on a disease-modifying level and not just a symptom level. So exercise is great. And Pilates specifically has been evaluated for those functional mobility and functional outcomes, but mostly in people with mild and moderate multiple sclerosis. The line is really in how much a person could walk without assistance. So the moderate line is if you can't walk more than 25 feet without assistance, you're in that severe category. And we only have one study about the wonderful benefits of Pilates for people with severe MS. And so that was a big gap in the literature. But additionally, I had a vested interest in understanding what we could do to make Pilates more effective for people with mild, moderate, and severe MS, because I teach group exercise programs in communities. We have an ongoing group exercise program, Move MS. It's been in place since 2018, and it's every single week. And we want to find ways to incorporate the best functional benefits we can with all of the different modalities of exercise that we teach. And one of the modalities that we teach regularly, because of my partner in crime in this Move MS program, Stacy, who has MS herself, is for training in stabilizing hip and shoulder cuff prior to movement. This model is called the 4-quadrant stability model. Here's Pilates, here's what it is, we're gonna skip that. The 4-quadrant stability model can be incorporated into multiple forms of exercise, but it hasn't been evaluated for its impact on functional outcomes. So I'm gonna have everybody quickly where you are, just kind of sink your heels into the ground. If your heel is underneath your knee, just sink your heels into the ground and slightly press to the side of your knee, just slightly. You can do maximum effort and then minimum effort and find somewhere around 30% of that. That is a stabilization exercise. It activates your hip cuff and it promotes what we call reflexive stability. So if you were to do that and then do a sit to stand, we see better improved movement because of that stabilization exercise. The muscles are activated and they're reflexively stable, meaning we can move. Stability is not being still, we can be stable and moving. And so we wanted to incorporate this +4, this 4-quadrant stability model in a Pilates program as an initial evaluation of what can this do to those functional benefits? Can it augment our functional benefits? And that was one goal. And then could we then take that 4-quadrant stability model and incorporate those cues and those exercises into all of the exercises that we do. We do Zumba, we do yoga, Tai Chi, aquatics, dance, it's wonderful. A purpose of this study specifically was first to see does a 12-week Pilates intervention that is seated, because we wanted to incorporate people with mild, moderate, and severe MS, does it result in functional improvements in balance and mobility? That was our first research question, our first hypothesis, that we thought we would see those functional benefits even in a seated protocol, even though the majority of evidence was in a standard standing or floor-based Pilates model. Our second research question was, does incorporating this 4-quadrant model of movement and cueing augment those functional improvements? So right here, we're already starting to create our randomized control design, where we're gonna have one group that is receiving a standard Pilates protocol and one that's getting this Pilates +4. And we thought we would see greater functional improvements. Now, because we were really curious, we wanted to see if during the testing session itself, and I'll tell you what measures we looked at, does the 4-quadrant cueing or providing a small exercise like the one you just did have any immediate benefits? And then lastly, does the group that receives the 4-quadrant version of the Pilates class have increased improvements during the cued version of the testing? So we have 4 research questions. We designed our intervention by developing first our seated protocol. We chose twice a week for 60 minutes for 12 weeks. We made sure it was seated, and then we incorporated our cueing and our 4-quadrant exercises at the beginning. We trained our instructors. We gave them all a manual. Our testing design, I'm going to actually skip to this one. We started with our timed 25-foot walk, timed up and go, and the bird balance scale. They were given uncued. Then we gave our questionnaires and gave quiet rest. Those questionnaires were about physical activity, mood, quality of life, fatigue, and function. And then we repeated our functional tests with cueing. So we taught 3 different cueing strategies or 3 different stabilization strategies and repeated those measures. They were randomized into the Pilates or the Pilates +4 group, given the active intervention, and we repeated our testing. Our results, quickly, we had 22 people enroll, 16 people finished everything. We had a wide range of people with different mild, moderate, and severe MS categories, so across the spectrum. Collapsing across our groups, our first research question, we saw some non-significant improvements in the timed 25-foot walk and the tug, but significant improvements in the Berg balance scale, which was super exciting that we could see that even with the seated protocol. Between our groups, we did see a significant improvement in the Berg between groups. Our Pilates +4 group actually had a more significant or a bigger improvement in balance than the regular Pilates group. And there were some improvements also in the tug and the timed 25-foot walk, but they weren't statistically significant. Feedback, they loved it. Discussion, not significant, not significant, subsignificant. And our next steps will be presenting in 1 month from today at the Consortium for Multiple Sclerosis Centers. We are about to submit a primary outcomes paper to Disability and Rehabilitation. We have video data we haven't even touched yet with an E4 monitor, which is an accelerometer, to see if movement is different. Even if it's not faster, it might be different, and then prepare for our 15. So thank you very much for your time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Last but not least, in our day, we started this morning at 9:30 of CRCW presentation. So we've saved Tima the last, and we'll give him a minute to set up here. And as you leave, again, please feel free. Those yogurts and fruits and things out there in the lobby are actually for us, and we don't want to send any back. So don't understand. Perfect.
All right. Thanks. Thank you for inviting me to actually present this the results of my CRCW proposal. And well, first of all, thanks a lot for this funding. It's an amazing opportunity to actually collect the preliminary data, and actually that resulted in the in quite nice nice proposal, and which got funded. So what I would like to start from is actually about talking about what my subject is. So my subject is interactions of waves, and particularly waves in magnetic materials. So, and waves you see everywhere in the universe. So they go from climate change to the turbulence in creation of interstellar matter and in creation of stars, or even waves and nonlinear behavior has been seen in the modeling of the early universe evolution. So these examples go and go, and one of the most known examples of waves, that's waves in water, right? So here you can see, for instance, solitary wave formation in the water in Edinburgh. So that what all of you have seen. The thing is that in my materials, in my area, I study waves of magnetization order. So in magnetic materials, I can also see waves similar to those which are in water. And for magnetic materials, if you zoom in onto atomic level, every atom possesses some magnetic moment. And if you move that magnetic moment, well, from its equilibrium position, it starts to oscillate, right? It's like an individual compass. But then you don't have individual, only one magnetic moment. You have a ton of them, and like in this chain, right? And if I wiggle just one, see they are coupled to each other. So therefore, one elementary excitation will spread through the medium in the form of a wave, which is, in fact, called spin wave. So well, of course, the dynamics of individual magnets is more complicated than that what I've shown on this cartoon. You can come later and play with that. So it's really entertaining thing. Well, of course, so we can find wavelengths of that wave, and we can write the complicated equations, which will give us the ability to describe how these waves are tunable. So just to give you a perception, so we are working in microwave frequency range. That's where your smartphones are communicating with the base stations. So from gigahertz to terahertz range. So these waves are really microscale, but they could could be scaled down to nanometer scale. So really important for if you want to use them for modern data processing applications. So these waves are intrinsically nonlinear. That's what those solitons are originating from. Of course, the elementary quasi-particles associated with those are bosons. So Bose-Einstein condensation, if you ever heard about that in physics, they are non-reciprocal. And well, for that, all the purposes, they are multi-purpose quantum carriers, as we would like to present them right now. These waves are the best to be studied in material where those waves are not damping immediately, where they can propagate for macroscopic distance. So not like that what I have here, for instance, so that I have only a couple of spins. So I want that to propagate back and forth, and which would give me time to study those. And the material of choice is yttrium iron garnet. It's rather complicated material on atomic level. It has like 80 atoms in its unit cell. But it's wonderful. It's marvel of nature because it has the longest known spin wave lifetime of about 700 nanoseconds at room temperature. So it's quite amazing material, but we can do a lot with that. So in order to give these waves a proper setting in order to manipulate with their properties, we need to create a kind of metamaterial. So, and one of that is that you can do, you can just pattern that thing. So, and that goes pretty much, you just cut the grooves in that waveguide material, and therefore this material, the transmission will become not smooth, but it will have some band gaps. So, but that patterning, it actually it's permanent. So once you cut it, you are done. Well, the idea of this proposal was to create it reconfigurable. And how to make it reconfigurable? Well, you need to bring in something which would make that material to change its properties, and then when you take that influence out, you will be, or change it, it will modify. So the idea was as following: we take our wonderful yttrium iron garnet material with very low damping, and then what we bring it to, adjacent to it, we bring pretty much like a permanent magnet, but close to it. So therefore, its magnetization will be imprinted into the structure of the yttrium iron garnet. So here, what I have a free magnet, and I have here an indicator film, which shows pretty much the poles of this magnet. So when I bring that close, you can see that it imprints the structure here. Exactly the same thing was planned to do in this proposal. So we just put a yek, which is soft magnet, and we put hard magnet on the bottom. Of course, this scales of these alterations, those are very small on the micro or nano scale. So yeah, so feel free to play with this. So and here what it results when you just take a film, put on top barium hexafluoride film. Well, you get this kind of spaghetti type of stuff. Well, which looks cool, but it's quite irregular shape. So regularization of that is what we've seen that goes for the future. So that's what we've seen. But what we've done in the proposal in order to study all these phenomena was actually to create an instrument which would allow us to probe the dynamics of spin waves in the material. And that's what we've done with the near field scanning microwave microscope which we created. So literally speaking, we created an antenna, a microscopic antenna, which was moving across the sample and collecting the time dynamics of spin waves at different spots of the sample. So with this instrument, we were able actually to study another phenomenon which we originally didn't put in the proposal, but what we found that this instrument is exactly cool for observing that. And this phenomenon is rock waves. So if you're ever in an ocean, you may see that, well, it's in permanent motion. There are waves. But from time to time, well, those waves add up. So you may have different waves with different phases, different amplitudes. They all are random, and when they are random, they add up to approximately like noise zero. But sometimes when you get very unfortunate, if you are in the sea, then they add up into a very high amplitude wave, which is called rock wave. It's a killer wave which would damage ships or any kind of construction which you put on the ship. So, and the thing is, well, we can do the same thing in magnetic materials. And the initial study has been done by our theoreticians from our department in 2020. And what they did, they actually created a rock wave inside of magnetic material. And you can see right now, this is a simulation. So the wave amplitude is the color. And here you can see that, well, it's moderate right now. But in the course of time, all these waves, all these random waves, they interfere with each other. And then at some point, you start seeing, oh, there's something. And look at that. There's a huge intensity peak forming. So, and we were puzzled whether we can see that experimentally. So one thing is in theory, another thing is experiment. So, and well, we did that. We did that experiment using the instrument which we built in this proposal. And well, as you can see, there's literally nothing, a bit of the amplitude, bit of excitation going on, right or left. Well, it's pretty much like noise-like environment. Then, after a while, you start to see that, oh, everything, yes, there, and here you are. You see the peak. You see the huge amplitude wave, which could be nonlinear, it could be used to, well, this could be used for data processing. And actually, well, all these concepts, they became a part of NSF Engineering Research Initiation proposal. And actually, that was successful. And with that $7,500, we were able to acquire then $200,000 for 2 years. So, and within the proposal, also there was one student funded during the proposal time, but after that, basically, like almost all my group became funded through this proposal. So, and that's 5 students so far. So, well, with that, I really would like to thank the CRCW committee for this wonderful opportunity. Looking forward for the future of this program, future development. Huge thumbs up. Well, thank you. I'm very open to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our future virtual audience as well. That concludes our day of CRCW presentations, and we will be back here next spring to see the cohort from 2021, 2022 give their talks. So thanks again for coming. Appreciate it. Now we can spin your